to start by reading you a poem. This is a poem by Maggie Smith called Good Bones. Life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways, 1,000 deliciously ill-advised ways that I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child is broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible, and for every kind stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I'm trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real shithole chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. And so, I read this poem because it is my belief that practicing compassion is one of the ways to work on making this place beautiful, on making this world beautiful. So the definition of compassion that I like to work with, and some of you have heard me talk about this when I spoke at UUSC, the definition of compassion that I like to work with is that compassion is holding suffering with loving kindness. That's what compassion is. It's about kindness. It's about holding the suffering, other people's suffering, the world's suffering, and our own suffering with loving kindness. It's not necessarily about fixing anything, about doing anything about it. It's about our attitude towards it. It's about how we hold it. What happens when we become aware of suffering? Can we hold that suffering with loving kindness? And that's what compassion is. It's not an easy thing to do, because the first thing that has to happen in order to have compassion is you have to notice the suffering. You have to be mindful, oh, that's painful. Either something that you're witnessing someone else, or a moment that you're having with yourself. Oh, this is painful, right? And so all compassion starts with mindfulness. And mindfulness is the ability to notice what is happening right here, right now, in this moment. And it sounds so simple, and unless you're somebody who really practices that, it's really hard. Our tendency as human beings is to be in the future, anticipating what's going to happen because we have to plan for it. That's a survival instinct. Or somewhere in the past, where we're replaying something, either something pleasurable to help ourselves feel better, or something difficult that we think if we play it over again, maybe we can change the outcome. It's very difficult to be in this present moment. And it's a really important practice, in particular, if you want to practice compassion. So I thought we would start this morning with a short guided mindfulness practice. So I'd like to invite you to get comfortable in your chair and close your eyes, or soften your gaze to some place in front of you if you're not comfortable closing your eyes. And just begin to notice your breath. Not changing it, not judging it, just noticing. Oh, there's my in-breath. There's my out-breath. Perhaps noticing how it feels. Do you feel it going in and out your nose? Do you notice your chest or your belly rising and falling? And then noticing your feet on the floor, or your tail in your chair. Is there a place where you can notice your body being in contact with your chair or your couch? And back to your breath. There's my in-breath. There's my out-breath. And opening your awareness and noticing, are there any sounds in your environment? A clock ticking, traffic, or birds outside your window. What's happening right now? Are there any smells? Perhaps the smell of coffee or leftover toast from this morning. And coming back to land in your breath. There's my in-breath, just as it is. There's my out-breath, just as it is. Being here, right now. And when you're ready, just coming back, opening your eyes. So I'd like to ask a question. I'd like you to check in with yourself. And when you think about having compassion, noticing suffering and being able to hold it with kindness, a kind thought, a kind feeling, a kind action, is that something that's easier for you to do for other people or easier to do for yourself? So just check that question for yourself. So you could, the people who I can see who have their video on, let me see a show of hands. How many people find it easier to have compassion for other people? So that's most of you, right? And that's been my experience in talking to people, is that most people, when a friend comes to them or they see some suffering, it's much easier to have that feeling of like, oh, wow, that must be so hard, than when it comes to yourself. And so I'd like to spend some time this morning with self-compassion practices, because I'm somebody who really believes that in order to be able to keep an openness to suffering in general, in particular other people's suffering, it is much harder to do that if you cannot have ongoing, regular compassion for yourself. And that's really hard for a lot of people. We tend to be really hard on ourselves. I don't know about you, but I have an ever-present, constant inner critic. It's in there all the time, pointing out what I could be doing better, what I'm doing wrong, what I should be doing. Well, you should, you should, you should, you should. And so the practice of self-compassion is so helpful. It's so important. And I know that in this time, that for many people, for many of us, and I'm going to imagine that quite a few of the people who are on this call who have the opportunity to be free on a Friday morning at 10 o'clock, to turn on their computers or their phone and come to a Zoom workshop on compassion, that most of us are having the privilege to shelter in place and or to work from home, right? And our refrigerators are full. And I don't know about you, but for me, I can often go to a place of guilt about that. Like, oh, I don't have a right to feel anxious, to feel scared, to feel all of those feelings that I think everyone's feeling in this time where there is a global pandemic, this time where there are big changes going on, where there are issues with race relations, where there's protesters, where there's anti-protesters, all of what's happening in the world right now. It can be really hard to feel like I, in all my privilege, have the space to have my feelings. And this is where self-compassion can be so helpful. So I'm going to talk just for a minute about Kristin Neff. Kristin Neff is a researcher. She is the kind of the key lead first person who did real scientific research on the benefits of self-compassion. And she did multiple controlled studies. And at this point, there have been thousands of studies by many academics about self-compassion and the benefits of self-compassion. And she looked at things about, like, you know, people who go through trauma. And a lot of her studies at first were done with survivors of military, of being in war. So big trauma. And what she discovered was that she developed something called a self-compassion scale. And you can actually find this online and you can take it for yourself. It's free. And you find out, where do you fall on the scale of self-compassion, just right now, before you start any kind of regular practice. And what she found without fail is that people who scored higher on the scale of self-compassion did better. They had much less PTSD. They just did better. And that's a finding that's been replicated many, many times. And so there's a great benefit to self-compassion. And so I would like us to, I'm going to guide you through a couple of self-compassion practices. So one of the places that I like to start is with, this is a very, very simple and very quick, and it's kind of something that you can use in the practices that are going to follow. And this is going to be a little meditation on soothing touch. So again, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And so an easy way to support ourselves when we're feeling badly is to offer ourselves some comforting or some soothing touch. Just as if we wanted to soothe someone else, we often will reach out. You might rub someone's back or hold their hand. So I'm going to invite you to take 2 or 3 really deep, satisfying breaths. And then, if it's comfortable for you, just place your hand over your heart. And just simply feel the gentle pressure and the warmth of your hands. You can feel the natural rising and falling of your chest as you breathe in and breathe out. And if you're someone who's uncomfortable putting your hand over your chest, I invite you to explore where in your body will gentle touch feel soothing. Maybe you might cup your hand over a fist. Or maybe you might put one hand on your belly. Or 2 hands on your belly. You could try a hand on your cheek. See what that feels like. To cradle your chin and your cheek in your hand. Some people like to put both hands over their face. Or cross your arms, holding yourself in a gentle hug. You could rock back and forth. Or simply cupping your hands in your lap. Just experiment and find some soothing touch that works for you. And finding a way to bring that to a close. And just notice how that made you feel to offer that soothing touch to yourself. So Kristin Neff, she breaks down the practice of compassion. And she's specifically talking about self-compassion. But I think this is true for compassion in general. She breaks it down into 3 parts. And so the first part, if the goal is to hold suffering with loving kindness, the first part, as I mentioned, is to be mindful of the suffering. That's the noticing part. Oh, there's pain here. There's suffering here. The second element of compassion, which is incredibly important, is the element of common humanity. That's the recognition that It's human to suffer. Life is full of suffering. And the pain that I am noticing, whether it's someone else's or my own, is shared. There is common humanity here. It's shared. Oh, I know what that feeling is like. Or sometimes if you see suffering, I often think about, many of us have had that experience of walking in a busy city, and we see, sometimes it's not even in a busy city. I've noticed more and more in suburban areas. You're getting off the highway, there's somebody standing there with a sign saying, we'll work for food, or I'm homeless. And so step number one is to actually be able to notice that. Wow, that person, something terrible must have happened that person is there, right? And the common humanity piece in those kinds of cases is often something like, but for the grace, that could be me. Or, wow, there are so many people who are in that boat. Or if the suffering is inside of yourself, you're noticing that, oh, I really screwed that up. And then you notice, oh, that's painful to notice that. And then the common humanity piece might be something like, well, everyone makes mistakes. I'm not alone, right? And so this piece of connecting everyone is a big element of compassion. And then the third piece is kindness. What's the kindest thing that I can do or be or feel or think in the face of this suffering? Right? So sometimes it's as simple as wishing someone well. Sometimes it's putting money in someone's cup or offering a meal, right? Sometimes it's just noticing that, oh, I'm having a judgmental thought about this person. And I'm going to notice that and shift that to a kind thought. So those are the three elements of compassion. And so I'm going to invite us into a practice that Kristin Neff calls the compassion break. And this is something that you can practice anytime that something is coming up for you that is uncomfortable. And so in order to do this practice, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and to think of a situation that is difficult, a situation that is causing you stress in your life right now. Just to call the situation to mind and see if you can actually feel the stress, the emotional discomfort in your body. Don't go to the most intense, hardest, most difficult, stressful thing happening right now. Think of something that feels moderately challenging, moderately hard. Maybe a health issue, maybe a challenge that you're having in your family. See if you can land on one thing that's bringing you discomfort. And now say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. That's mindfulness. Find language that works for you. It might be something like, ouch. This hurts. This is stress. This is a moment of suffering. And now say to yourself, suffering is a part of life. This is the common humanity piece. Suffering is a part of life. And again, find language that works for you. Other people feel this way. I'm not alone. We all struggle in our lives. Suffering is a part of life. And now, if it feels comfortable to you, put your hands over your heart or whatever piece of soothing touch that you found was helpful. And in that place of suffering, of discomfort, of whatever your challenge is that you're working with, be kind to yourself. Say something like, may I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. I'm good. So this self-compassion break is something that you can practice at any time. You can make it a daily practice where you sit down and you kind of call up and you get in touch with something that you're feeling anxious about, or you can do it in the moment. Something comes up, you notice, and you can just quickly say, this is a moment of suffering. And then remember, life is full of suffering, I'm not alone. And then say something kind to yourself. What can I do in this moment or say in this moment to hold my struggle with kindness? Right? Yeah. So it's really human when we feel really anything painful. The survival instinct says run, right? Or fight. Right? So we often very quickly convert those feelings to anger or avoidance. And, most of us have a long list of things that we engage in to try to not stay present with all of those really hard feelings that come up in the face of suffering, other people's suffering or our own. And those can be, really benign things like, watching Netflix, all the way to some really challenging, difficult things. Rage is often really rooted in trying not to feel the more vulnerable feelings underneath, lashing out, substance abuse. Lots of us, myself included, use food. I don't know about anybody else, but my chocolate consumption is through the roof these days. because it's really hard. It's hard to be with suffering. It's really hard to be with suffering. And so compassion practices are a way to practice being with the suffering. And that's why I call this workshop Opening the Heart, because the Buddhists talk about becoming a bodhisattva. And basically that means one with an open heart, an awakened heart. And if you're going to awaken your heart and open your heart, it means you're opening your heart to pain and to suffering, which means going against our impulse to fight the suffering, to try to get rid of the suffering, to avoid the suffering, our own and other people's. Most of us have some part that thinks that, you know, I can't survive it. If I feel that, if I see that, if I'm with that, I can't survive it. And so the things we do to avoid it, to fight it, to be against it are so automatic. And so these practices can slow you down so that you can make space and open your heart to the suffering. And it helps to remember that it is the human condition, and then we can bring kindness. So I'd like to do a little exercise around finding phrases that work for you. And so if you don't already have access to a piece of paper and a pencil, take a few minutes to find something that you can write on. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you a quick story. This is the story of Milarepa, who was a Buddhist philosopher, sage, millennia ago. And there are lots of stories about him. And so this is the story of how he was out one day and he came back to his cave, and he walked into his cave and it was filled with demons. And oh no, my cave is full of demons. Ah! And he picks up his sword and he starts, you know, trying to kill them. I'm going to fight them. I'm going to fight them. And as he's like waving his sword around and trying to kill them off, they're doubling and they're multiplying. And he's, oh my God, this isn't working. Oh, so he realizes that, okay, this is not going to work. The more I fight them, the more they come on. I will sit down with them and I will teach them the Dharma. That's what I'll do. You know, I'm going to teach them all about, you know, compassion and all the good stuff. And that's going to get rid of them. And so he sits down and he starts to give a Dharma talk, and they just look back at him with their big scary eyes and their big fangs, and they come at him, and he's like, okay, well, that's not working. And he just says, all right, there's nothing I can do. I guess I'm just gonna have to accept that they're here. Maybe I will make them some tea. And as soon as he has that thought, they all just melt away, except for the one biggest, scariest one back in the corner, who's just there coming at him. And he feels all the fear and all the anxiety and oh my God. And he just says, all right, you know what? Go ahead, eat me. And with that, the last demon melts away. Right? So I've been working with the image of this story a lot because, of course, the cave is the inside of me, and the demons, for me, are all of those feelings that are so hard, right? The feelings of not being good enough, the feelings of grief, the feelings of loss, the feelings of fear. Oh, there's so much fear. I have so much fear right now. And how do I invite them in? How do I be with them with compassion, right? Not try to teach them the Dharma. That's the spiritual bypass. Maybe if I meditate enough, I won't feel this. And the human suffering, the human condition is that, no, these feelings are here. And so compassion practices. And so we're gonna see about finding phrases that work for you. So again, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And notice your breath. And then ask yourself this question. What do I really need? In any given day, in my life, overall, what feels really necessary to me to feel okay? Right? You might think, I really need love, or I really need to be happy. I really need connection, or I really need good sleep. I really need peace. What is it at the end of the day? What are the things that feel like you really need them? Just let yourself explore that internally for a moment. What do I really need? What do I really want? And when you're ready, you can take a few moments and just jot those things down. It could be 1 or 2 things, it could be 10 things. So whatever came up for you, and you can really think about, these are some of the things that I really want and need on a daily basis. Once you've done that, and you're ready, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes again. And ask yourself, what are some phrases that I just long to hear? What are the things that, like, if I could hear whispered in my ear by a beloved before falling asleep every night, what is it that I'm longing to hear? It might be things like, you're special. I'll protect you. You're such a beautiful person. You're loved. Thank you for all that you do. Just what is your heart longing to hear? As a truth about the world or about you. And when you're ready, you can jot those things down as well. And now I'm going to ask you to choose 1, 2, or at most 3 things and put them into a format that you can say to yourself. It might be something, so like if one of your needs was for loved, you might write something like, may I feel loved, right? Or may I feel special. May I know that I'm safe. May I know that I'm protected. So pick 1 or 2, or at the most 3 of the most salient things for you. And write those out, those 1 or 2, or at most 3 things. And this becomes the phrases that you can use for a compassion meditation. And you can do this as a self-compassion meditation, where you just repeat to yourself over and over whatever your thing or things is. It might be, may I feel safe, may I feel happy, may I feel loved. And you can repeat that over and over as you breathe. And you can also do this as a compassion meditation for others. May all beings feel safe. May all beings feel loved. May all beings feel happy. Whatever your salient words or phrases are. You can use this as a practice. You can sit down for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just repeat these phrases over and over. So the last compassion practice that I'd like to share with you is a practice that was created by a woman named Tara Brach, who is a psychotherapist and a meditation teacher, and she has a long time meditation practice. She's a public speaker. You can find her and her website also. Just Google Tara Brach. And she came up with this process, which I think is a really, really helpful process. And she calls it RAIN. And you might want to jot this down so that you can remember it. It's RAIN, and it's an acronym. Okay, and so RAIN, R stands for recognize. Recognize what's going on. A stands for allow. That's just to allow it to be there. I stands for investigate. Investigate with interest and care. And N stands for nurture. Nurture with self-compassion. So I'm going to lead you through this practice, and this is a practice that you can explore as a meditation. You can sit down and do this as a meditation. It's also something that you can, like the compassion break, in a moment when something hard is happening and you notice you're triggered, you can take a minute to go through these steps. But I'm going to lead you through this as a meditation. So again, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, get comfortable, whatever that is for you, in your chair that you're in right now. If you want to lie down, as long as you're not tired and you'll fall asleep, just be comfortable and close your eyes. And again, I'm going to invite you to call up a feeling, something that you're struggling with, one of those demons. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe you're angry at something or someone. Just choose one situation or feeling, something that's emotionally difficult, right? And we begin by recognizing. This is similar to the mindfulness. Recognize what's going on. Label it. Wow, this happened, or this is happening, and I'm feeling this. So recognize that. And then allow that experience, that feeling to just be there. You can say to yourself, yeah, this belongs here right now. This feeling belongs here right now. I'm going to allow it to just be. Yeah, just allowing. And next, to investigate with interest and care, and start by investigating, where do I feel this in my body? Where is this? Maybe your chest is tight, or it's in your throat, or your stomach is. So begin your investigation there. And then just gently, with curiosity and interest and caring, investigate the feeling. Where did this come from? How am I experiencing this? Notice if your mind wants to start to problem solve, and just see if you can go back to allowing the experience to be there and investigating with interest and care. You might ask, what does this vulnerable place want from me? Coming back to the felt sense in your body. Where is it in my body? What's going on in my body? And then N, nurture. Nurture with self-compassion. So perhaps putting your hand on your heart or one of those self-soothing touches that you found worked for you. And perhaps saying one of those phrases to yourself. You're loved. It's not your fault. I'm here for you. Just a whispered message of care for yourself. Sometimes it helps to bring to mind a loving being, a spiritual figure, a friend, or a pet. And just imagine that being's love and wisdom flowing into you and holding you in whatever that place of pain is. And now there's a little space for what Tara Brach calls after the rain. This is just to take a minute to notice the quality of your own presence. To notice, to realize that you don't have to be imprisoned in or identified with any kind of limiting view of yourself. So these are just a few of many compassion practices. And I focused on self-compassion today. And as I said, it's because I really believe that it is from a place of self-compassion that we can go forth and hold the incredible suffering of the world and of other people with kindness. Is from that place where we have a well of compassion for ourselves. Because to notice someone's suffering and to be present with someone else's suffering is really painful. And there are many practices for sending compassion out to others and sending compassion out to the world. There's the Tonglen process where you breathe in suffering and you breathe out compassion. And the list could go on. We could have a 3-hour workshop, but this is a 1-hour workshop. And so I've given you some things that I hope will be useful for you, and I hope that you will practice. I really encourage you to take a little time every day and do the compassion break or the RAIN practice, or the practice of using your own phrases. You can use your own phrases for the final stage of both the compassion break and the RAIN practice. When you're nurturing yourself, when you're being kind to yourself, you can use those phrases. Or you can just do those phrases as a meditation all by itself, or you can use those phrases to send out to the world. And so you can make that a Tonglen practice by breathing in the suffering. When you breathe in, you recall suffering. You can start with suffering of people that you love, and sending out whatever the wishes you would have for yourself, you send it to them, and in and out and in and out. And that's a way that you can use that. And I hope that this has been useful for you and that you will use these practices. And I would like to close by sharing a song with you. And I invite you again to close your eyes and really listen and take it in. My apologies. Here we go.
I've decided to be happy. I've decided to be glad. I've decided to be grateful for all I ever had. I've decided to let go of all this pain tonight. I've decided to let go of all these demons inside. I know I am blessed. I know all I ever wanted was this. I know I don't need more. I've got what I came for. I've decided to be open to that little voice inside, telling me I'm beautiful. It's okay to be alive. I've decided to be kinder to myself when I feel sad. I've decided to be grateful for all I ever had. I know I am blessed. I know all I ever wanted was this. I know I don't need more. I've got what I came for.
So thank you for joining me. I want to honor the time. And so we're going to officially end now. But I'm also going to invite those who would like to share to unmute yourself and stay on, and give you some opportunity to ask questions or to share how that was